Hey viewers, my name's Kara. I'm your host for Tuesdays on the Pagan Perspective, and this week I'm doing another direct upload, and the topic is about self-magic as it relates to Satanism. It's a term that exists within the Satanist community that our questioner this week said they haven't really seen creep into the pagan community, so they want to know our thoughts on it. So the question is actually, when we do magic in our personal path and practice, are we using what they call self-magic? Are we using element or energy magic? Or deity magic? Or all of the above? And do we use them all simultaneously or somehow put together? Do we switch back and forth between different things at different times? And then they also went on to describe what they consider self-magic. So do read the topic as they wrote it in the description of the video. It's a little bit longer because they wanted to include all these explanations and everything. So the first question, really the question this week is, of those types of magic that I just mentioned, what do we use in our practice? And then kind of going on to talk about whether we knew about the term self-magic and what we think of it. So first question, going by their definitions of what they listed, I use all of those different types of magic. So now I'm going to go through and talk about self-magic specifically. So self-magic, they defined, my paraphrase, as, they defined this as magic from the self, as coming from no outside source. The energy is coming from you alone and not from any outside elements, not from earth, not from any deity, whatever. It's just you and your own energy that you're putting forth. And then the second sort of definition they gave, they described it as kind of like just a psychological use. And the word that they used was psychodramatic. It's a psychodramatic experience that causes effect and causes change within you. And so I have various things to say based on all of this. So first thing, the definition or the way of thinking of it as magic from self without any outside force or source rather, not tapping into any other source, but using your own energy. To me, that is kind of what I talk about when I've been talking about grounding on my personal channel. I've been doing some more recent videos talking about grounding and why we do it and how I do it, and also why that is important for if you're doing any work where you're going to be sending people energy. Because using only your own energy and not tapping into any other outside source, whether it be the earth, the sky, the sea, a specific deity, an animal spirit that you're working with, whatever it may be, if you're not tapping into any of those other things, that is a recipe for draining your energy if you're doing something that requires a lot of energy expenditure. Now, there are things that we do where we don't really expend a lot of energy, so it doesn't matter so much if you're not really tapped into those other sources. But if you're doing something that expends a lot of energy and you're only using your own energy, that's how you end up with energy drain. You only have so much energy at a time before you have to rest and recuperate and recharge to regain energy. Whereas if you are tapped into something else, like when you're grounded to the earth and the sky and whatever else, that energy is flowing through you as a conduit, and that is how you are able to do these immense things that might take more energy than you have without having to expend your own energy. So that's the first thing. The second part they were talking about, I actually want to pull up what they said on my phone. So they described it as having nothing to do with magic at all, just a psychodramatic experience, a form of venting, a mental contract, a strong symbolic reminding event to look back on, to remind yourself that you wanted to accomplish this thing, whatever it is, and they say it is so powerful, so mind-altering that you can't forget it, but no, they used quotes here, no quote-unquote magic is used. Magic may not even be believed in for this case. Now, if you read that description in the description of this video, that is magic. Spoiler alert, that's magic. I know that a lot of this has to do with this ongoing debate where people are always going to talk about this and discuss this because it's so hard to describe how each of us relates to magic and what magic means to us, and I'll go to this other thing later, but it's also very difficult to describe our relationship with deity. And so these things I feel are things that we're never going to fully agree on because, again, this community is so large, we all have various different ways of looking at things, but I think that the reason that the term self-magic maybe hasn't come into the rest of the pagan community is because we recognize that as magic. That is just part of magic, that magic is this huge thing that exists in multiple ways, that it can be drawing from yourself, or it can be drawing from elements and energy, or it can be drawing from a connection with deity, whatever, and that's all magic. So that would just be my guess as to why that term hasn't become used outside of Satanism, outside of groups that think that it's not really magic, that they're doing something that's not really magic, so they've come up with another term for it. Whereas, in my belief, and the way I see things and the way I do things, the way you described that is magic. Magic has a lot to do with psychology, for sure. So one of the other things that the questioner mentioned has to do with element magic and energy magic, saying that one of the reasons that people use self-magic might be because they don't believe that they can really control the elements, for example, because you don't snap your fingers and have a ball of flame appear, or you don't snap your fingers and have a wave come crashing down, like if you're a waterbender or whatever, we don't bend the elements, so we feel like we don't really feel that energy, whereas you can feel your own energy inside you, so that's one reason that people might use self-magic as they're calling it. And then also pointing out a little bit later in their description an example of how people would do ritual differently by saying, element of water, come into my circle, versus come forth empathy and compassion of the rolling tide, and calling upon these qualities of water, where they're not calling water, they're calling the elements, that's not the word I wanted, that's confusing, they're calling the characteristics that are associated with the element of water. I emphasized that strangely. But anyway, so they're thinking of that as two different things. But again, that's magic. Those two different forms are used together with most people. Most of the way that I've seen people call elements and things like that is we are using what the questioner this week calls flowery language to add on this psychological effect and really deepen our minds into what it is we're doing. That's magic. That is elemental magic. That's not something different. That is what we're doing when we're calling on the elements. So I don't know if they were just trying to give a really extreme example when they were talking about how like you can't literally, form a ball of fire in your hand or whatever, which I could if I had fancy special effects packages, but I don't. But I don't know if that was just an exaggeration for descriptions purposes, or if some people think that's really what we mean when we say we work with the elements, that they think that we really control the elements. Because, yeah, some people can, some people do weather magic, and yes, there are some elements of that where we call on air and the wind actually picks up and, just completely tears through the circle and then stops when we tell it to, or when we stop raising energy or whatever. Sure. But no, I can't make it rain immediately when I want it to, or waves come crashing in. I can't form a ball of fire in my hands from absolutely nothing flammable. That's not what we mean. But when we call the elements into our circle, we are calling the energy of those elements and the qualities of those elements. So when I'm calling the elements into my circle, I might be saying I call upon the powers of air, intellect and decision making, winds of change, all of these different things that I associate with air. When I call upon fire, I might be calling upon the warmth of the fire that stokes the flame in my heart, the passion and creativity and the spark that is within me. That is what I'm calling on when I call the element of fire, for example. So again, I think this is just communication issues and people thinking that we mean certain other things when we don't. So the other thing that I wanted to mention was the last point they made. They were asking about whether people invoke deity the same way, because they said that they've heard us and other people talk about invoking deity but without actually believing in them, and so they're wondering if that means that those people are incorporating self-magic because they're not actually working with the deities or because they don't actually believe in deity. And at the time that I got this topic, the time that I read this topic suggestion, it was the second time that week that I had heard someone associated with Satanism say that soft polytheism, or people who have a symbolic view of deity, saying that it means we don't believe in deity at all, and therefore thinking that we were talking about something completely different. So this is what I said I would get to later, where I think this is just one of those things where it's very difficult to explain your own connection with deity to other people. It's not something that I think I'm ever going to be able to do 100%, because no matter how many times I've talked about it on this channel now, there are still people who never see those videos and whatever else. I'll link to it. We did a video on labels a while ago where I talked about why the term soft polytheism fits my practice and what I feel about it, and all the different elements of definition that I feel go into it. But anyway, yeah, it was the second time I had heard someone say that, thinking that that means we don't believe in deity at all. And I feel that that is incorrect. I think that's a misunderstanding. It's not that we don't believe in deity at all. I think there's a piece missing from that, which is we don't believe in deity as literal, physical, solid, concrete beings. We view them, for the most part, this is the way I hear a lot of people describe it, we view them as psychological archetypes. We view them as energy forms. And, you know, I'm not willing to say that just because I don't believe that a physical form of a deity could manifest in front of me solidly as I am, I'm not willing to say that that means I don't believe in them just because I view them more energetically, I interact with them energetically on a non-physical plane, and that I call in characteristics and aspects of them, such as working with Athena for justice and wisdom, and working with Thor for weather magic, and whatever it may be, just because that's the way I interact with them, and other people interact with them as literal concrete beings who live somewhere on another plane, or on this plane, just in another location. You know, there are various things that people believe about it. So I'm not trying to put words into people's mouths, because I know everyone listening to this will say, that's not exactly what I believe, and that's not exactly what I believe. And that's the point. That's the point that I'm trying to make, is that we all have these little different ways. So I don't think we will ever fully be able to grasp what other people are saying. But I just wanted to say that for my part, I think that that final point that they made in their question is a misunderstanding. It's not that we don't believe in deity at all. So no, I would say that we are not using self-magic. It's still deity magic. It's calling upon the power of something else that is not simply you. So I do understand the distinction that is being made by the term self-magic, and what I would consider that is just magic that you do being cut off from any outside source and not tapping into anything else, not grounding, not calling upon anything else. And that is a legitimate form of magic, but it's just another form of magic. So I don't feel the need to call it anything different. And it's not something that I employ very often, because like I said, I recognize more and more the importance of tapping into those other sources and calling on those other things and working with them in concert to accomplish what we're going to do. So yeah, spoiler alert, I think all that is magic, and if you are interested in hearing what I had to say about something else somewhat related to this, a while ago on this channel, a couple years ago now, we did videos talking about folk magic versus ceremonial magic and celestial magic, and what we think of those. And that is a much different distinction that I do understand a little bit more, why we kind of divide them up. Sort of other terms that we use for them are high magic versus low magic, folk magic versus ceremonial, and whether it's very specific and ceremonialized versus folk being kind of casual, I guess I would say. Anyway, I'll put a link to the video that I did about that as well, because that is a similar discussion of different types of magic and how I use them in my practice. So to answer the original question again, yes, I use all of those different things. I use element and energy magic and deity magic, because I do call on all of those different things, and also ancestors, fae, animal spirits and guides, spirit guides when they apply, things like that. And I don't so much employ what the questioner is referring to as self-magic, because that feels very cut off from other sources that could be helping me. But I do understand what the terminology applies to in that usage. So, thanks so much for this question. It was really interesting to think about, for sure, and I hope that you've all learned something and have something now to think about. And just always remember that we use terms different ways, and labels are only helpful insofar as they're helpful, and when they start to be a hindrance, don't feel the need to attach yourselves to them. And like I always say, just be prepared to explain things to people. If multiple people identify with the same terminology, but we use it all in different ways, we start assuming that we mean different things when we really don't. We're all talking about magic, so we have to be ready to explain what that means to us in order to see if we really do agree more than we disagree. So thanks so much for watching. I will see you next month, because next week is Subs Week. And until then, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye. Have a great day.